What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Day Sniper Podcast. I am Kalen Wojcik. I am your host, and I'm taking a little break from finishing up the wind reading blueprint out here on the range. We're going to talk to you guys more about that in a minute. This episode of the Modern Day Sniper Podcast, we have gone back into our history lessons, and we brought Nate back for round two. And in this one, we're going to be talking about an influential member of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, which is Mr. Daniel Morgan. Mr. Morgan pioneered the use of sharpshooters and riflemen in the American Revolution and really threw the British for a loop using those unconventional tactics that pretty much would get snipers dubbed as the shadows of the battlefield. Mr. Morgan's tactics and techniques worked really well against the British, and some would say and argue that he was the most influential member of the war in getting the British to capitulate and surrender. So this whole podcast is super awesome with regard to history, and I'm really excited about continuing these episodes because I love history and learning about these influential members of the early community of riflemen and how that evolved into what we have today. Before we get into the podcast, you guys can see I'm sitting out here on the range and I've got all of my observation gear here. I got some wind flags going, and we're talking about the wind reading blueprint. This is going to be the most badass online digital wind reading masterclass that you guys have available to you out there. We are super stoked to bring this to you guys, and we're going to be launching this in middle of October, and look for a date of the launch coming shortly. So without further ado, let's get into the episode and learn about Mr. Daniel Morgan. What's up, man? So we are back for a history episode number 2. A lot of people love it. They've just commented and they're just like, those, hopefully we do more of those. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So, but we wanted to wrap up Louis Wetzel's history, his posthumous history. Right. So you're going to cover that before we get into
just a couple minutes.
Next member. All right, let's do it.
Okay. So we left off with Louis Wetzel and his last combat action when basically the war was over. But he was just visiting home, and must have been somebody that had a grudge against him, tried to snipe him out, but unfortunately he was a master sniper and he sniped him out. But I wanted to say what happened to him. He lived for a few more years. There was a big river traffic from the Ohio country down all the way to Mississippi, to the Ohio River, Mississippi River, and on down. And there was river pirates. And so Louis Wetzel was famous in his time for violence enacted on the behest of the citizens. So the riverboat owners hired him as a guard. And when word got out that Louis Wetzel was on the boat, the pirates said, "Fuck that. We don't want to be tomahawked and scalped and hanging off this wall and shit."
The origination of Ground Find Out.
Yeah. They said, "Fuck that." So he was popular for that reason. He got a lot of work. That he also did some hunting for people for food and things he was skilled at. And he ended up living with his cousin, a guy named Philip Sykes, down in Natchez, Mississippi for his remaining years. And he contracted yellow fever in 1808. And he refused medical treatment. He was famous in his time, and everybody, was interested in helping him hopefully survive. But he wouldn't take any medical treatment. Philip said, "Why?" And he said, "Hey, the Indians are all gone, and if they were there, I wouldn't be able to chase them in the mountains anymore. I'm too old, and so, I'm happy just to check out." This guy was a warrior to the end. And so he died, and his cousin Philip wanted to retain the rifle for posterity because he was aware of the fact that his cousin was famous and the rifle would want to be cherished. But his wife was like, "No. The Southern people even now are somewhat superstitious." And she said, "That rifle's cursed. It's killed too many people. It's going in the ground with him." And so they put it in the ground with him, and he laid there for over 100 years. And in 1942, he was exhumed. There was some question about whether that's how he died. There was a rumor he'd ran to Texas with a Spanish woman. I believe that's false, because when they dug him up in 1942, the skeleton had black hair down to its ass it was 6'1", and the rifle was there. So certainly that was him. And they took him back to West Virginia, where he's from. And so that was, I just wanted to add that as far as Louis Wetzel, that was his conclusion. And so now we can get into Daniel Morgan. And here's something I'll say for people that want a little bit of a frame of reference. If you, the movie The Last of the Mohicans, that character is roughly based on Louis Wetzel, right? The same kind of area of the country, the same type of period. There's a French Indian War. And the movie with Mel Gibson, Patriot, is roughly based on the guy we're getting ready to talk about, Daniel Morgan. I'm talking real roughly, right? I mean, the movie
just to provide a storyline.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. You'll see that there's some similarities, but it's you know how Hollywood is. You certainly don't watch the movies and think, oh, this is this guy. In both cases, you know, Hollywood has to really civilize things. Of course, they can't show the way it really is because people would be, you know, traumatized or whatever.
I think though the movie that does replicate that quite well is The Revenant.
Yeah, I've never even watched that movie.
Oh, you haven't watched that? You got to watch that.
I've read Hugh Glass my whole life, but I've never watched the movie.
Yeah, so I think I read the book first, and then I watched the movie, and I think that they did as good a job as you possibly could, you know?
Right.
Because you got to movies got to have something to them.
Right.
So, but they didn't, like, you know, they're just covering Hugh Glass from the time that he was a trapping guide. Right. Nothing before that, like his escapades through the Caribbean and like that's all covered in the book, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, so, the books are always better than the movie.
That was Luke saw it too, so he's fascinated with that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch it. I just, because of what you're saying, you know, I read about Hugh Glass when I was a teenager because he was a mountain man and his story's famous and how tough he was. And so when the movie came out a few years ago, I kind of just say, you know, probably wrongfully poo-pooed it. So I don't want to watch that, you know, but now I will because of what you just said.
It's good. Yeah. It's good. Yeah,
for sure.
So Daniel Morgan.
Yes.
Very, very famous American rifleman.
Big time. Right now, there's probably 100 streets, cities, and things named after him throughout the mid-south to south. Statues everywhere. Big hero of the Revolution. And, you know, I wrote some things. Just, you know, he was called an undignified guerrilla, Hannibal of America. Horatio Gates, who was the general he worked for, said that the British feared him the most, him and his riflemen, because, you know, officers were targeted. Cannoneer teams were targeted.
Which at that point in time was just ungentlemanly.
Yeah, that's why he was called the undignified guerrilla.
Right.
And you'll find out why he did that, because him and some of the other famous officers of the Revolution all were British officers first in the French Indian War. And they got tuned up by Native Americans and found out that, hey, marching around with our pipes blaring and our flags waving is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. It's a good way to get yourself, you know, sniped, and have no recourse. You won't even see where you got sniped from.
Right.
So that's how they were on the receiving end of that. And the other thing that the French did is they had brought in Hessian German mercenaries, which Germany is where the rifle came from. And a lot of those Hessian troops were like gamekeepers back in Europe. And so they were very skilled. And they also were sniping our people. So when the Revolution started, Washington, General Gates, as we'll see, Daniel Morgan, they remembered all that. And Daniel Morgan's unique background, unique character, allowed him to be singled out almost immediately to lead this type of warfare.
Sure.
So he was illiterate.
But where's he born?
Yeah, he was born in New Hampton, New Jersey, July 6, 1736.
Okay.
He might have been born in Pennsylvania, but this is what we're going to go with. all four of his grandparents were Welsh immigrants from Wales, and his parents moved to New Jersey together. So they'd already hooked up in Pennsylvania and moved to New Jersey. Some think he might have already been born, but most sources cite that he was born in New Jersey, July 6, 1736.
Okay.
He was the fifth of 7 kids. He got into a argument with his father at age 17, which is not unusual. And so as a result of that fight, he left home. And he kind of wandered around for a while. He went back to Pennsylvania and worked at some logging teams. He worked as a farmer. And eventually he ended up in Northern Virginia at modern-day Winchester. And at that time, you got to realize Virginia was the frontier. You know, the way America was settled was New England was settled first, and the South was a wilderness, and Virginia was right on the border. So it would be like living out in Wyoming in 1870 or something. It was the frontier, and he got a job working as a teamster. Basically, there was a lot of need to move people and products across the wilderness. And you needed kind of a tough guy to do that because there was enemy, there was Indians, there was obstacles to overcome. So he got a job doing that. And within 2 years, by the time he was 19, he'd saved up enough money to buy his own horse teams and own carts and hire his own drivers. So he was doing pretty well for himself for a young man. And, you know, on Frontier, Virginia in those days, there wasn't too many records, but there was 2 places that kept records. The Winchester General Store and the Frederick County, Virginia courthouse. And he shows up in both. At the Winchester store, the only thing he seems to have bought is liquor and cards. And at the Frederick County courthouse, he was constantly in there for drinking, fighting, gambling, arson, theft. All, you know, he was kind of a rabble rouser, and but he never, you know, on the theft. Every time that there was like on the theft thing, he went in there and said, "Yeah, I did it," but it doesn't say. But the judge and jury just made him pay for the horse. So I think in most of the cases, he had extenuating circumstances to where frontier justice was kind of like, well, yeah, he did this, but maybe the other guy deserved what he got.
Yeah, for sure. That's the way it was, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there was some semblance of civilization.
Well, what it looks
at some
like
point.
is that, you know, it's not like it is now where, you know, the judge is not a full-time job. It's just he got that job, but he's still got to do his own thing. So it looks like on a periodic basis, the whole town of Winchester would gather up and they just settle all the business for like the last so much time.
Yeah.
And in those meetings, our young man showed up regularly for having some kind of a run-in with somebody.
I saw on a little divergence here. I saw on a National Geographic. There's at least there could be more, but they did this one tribe, one village in South America, and every year the whole village gets together and they form basically a boxing ring. And if you got a grievance with somebody,
right,
it's like, hey, let's go. And they just beat the shit out of each other. Like, yeah, bare knuckle, just let's get it on. Let's do it. And they settle their grievances. And the goal is that when everybody leaves, everybody's on a clean slate.
Yeah.
It's all over with.
I think that we're going to go back to that to at least some degree. You know, ancient Greece was that way.
Right.
You know, every city-state had a battlefield outside the city walls. And like you said, when grievances between city-states popped up, all the able-bodied men donned their armor and weapons, and they went out there. They fought it out, and that fight solved the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it wasn't like now it was total war. Neither city-state was trying to totally destroy the other one. They're just trying to settle this grievance.
Yeah.
And now, you know, once World War I and II happened, war went from a normal part of society to where it's now war is too dangerous to get involved in. It's happening to us now because it can escalate to total destruction.
Yep.
And so on one hand, it's good that fighting's not as much, but on the other hand, it's building up.
Yeah.
We got to have an outlet.
Yeah.
Like the tribesmen or the ancient Greeks, or in this case, Daniel Morgan. And so, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. So anyway, by the time he's 19, he's his own guy. He owns his own teams, his own carts, and he's doing well for himself. And now it's about 1755. He moved to Winchester in 1753. Unfortunately for him, the French-Indian War, and that's what we call it in North America, but it was a world war. It was one of the first world wars. It was called the 7 Years' War. And it was basically England and Germany, France, Spain, and everybody, and they're all jostling for,
Trade dominance.
Yeah. And so there was fighting all over the world. In North America, it was between the French and the British. The French's allies were the Indians. That's what we called the French-Indian War. And our people were on the British side.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a civilian, he gets convoked. You know how the military, if they need to, they'll just go in and say, boom, we're conscripting this.
Mm-hmm.
So they conscripted him and his horses and carts to move their baggage around behind the military commanders. And so he gets involved in this thing called Braddock's defeat. Now here's the interesting part of this. Braddock was a British officer, a general. One of his under officers was corporal, or not corporal, but Colonel George Washington at this time. Daniel Morgan, who's a teamster, along to help him is his cousin Daniel Boone. All these men are in this group, and they're going to what's now Pittsburgh, and they called it something different back then, which I'll probably do a bad job of pronouncing it.
It's a
Duquesne, something like that. Is a weird Indian name, Duquesne. I don't know. I'm butchering
is that,
that.
and that's a place in what?
It's Pittsburgh now.
Oh,
it
Pittsburgh.
It was a
okay.
fort on the river back then.
Got it. Yeah.
It's occupied by the French,
Mm-hmm.
and the British are going there to launch an offensive to dislodge them from this fort and capture it.
Got it.
They've got General Braddock leading. Colonel Washington is part of the officer staff, and Daniel Boone and Daniel Morgan are bringing up the rear with the baggage train.
Got it.
Not even, and the other thing, here's the dynamic. General Braddock was a British citizen, an officer. Colonel Washington was what they called a continental, and Morgan and Boone were like militia.
Mm-hmm.
And so the British looked down their nose. And so on the way, the militia's like, hey, General Braddock, you might want to stop waving the flags, quiet the pipes, deploy
some scouts.
Deploy some scouts off either flank so that we can find the enemy, so that we just don't wander into a ambush here.
Right.
Because the militia were the people that lived there and were used to how the Indians did things. Well, General Braddock said that was, not decorum, he didn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kept his flags waving, his pipes, and he, in perfect marching order, the French, the Indians, of course, had scouts and figured out what was going on. They abandoned the fort, left it empty, and set up a big ambush in a really thick wooded area right before, and just Braddock went in there and got himself killed, almost his entire officer staff, and almost all of his privates. The reason Daniel Morgan and Daniel Boone didn't get killed is because they were half a mile back with the baggage, and they could see what was going on. Allegedly, Daniel Boone pitched a few shots up there into the Indians, and then both him and Daniel Morgan cut a horse off the team with a knife, just cut one horse out, had to leave everything and flee. General Washington survived and actually extracted General Braddock out of there and led the rear guard with what was left, hooked up with Daniel Morgan and they went back to where they came from. Mm-hmm. But it was a big disaster. Later on, the British eventually won the French-Indian War, but this was at the beginning of it, and it was a big fuck up. And that was one of their first lessons. Hey, fighting here in this North American wilderness is not the same as the fields of Europe at all.
Right.
Now, another thing that we need to talk about this campaign is at some point, And we already have established that Daniel Morgan. Let's talk about what he looked like. He was big. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, and was like a giant of a man for back then. I mean, even today that would be a big dude.
Yeah.
But for back then, he's just like this huge dude.
Yeah.
And we already have established that he liked to fight. He liked to drink. He was just kind of this big, rabble-rousing young man who wasn't used to, didn't like what his dad told him, got in a fight with him, right? Did things his way. Now imagine that. And now he's got to do what a British officer tells him.
It's probably not going to go over too well.
You can see how this is going to go. So at some point after they got all effed up, you can see at this point, Daniel Morgan doesn't have any confidence in these guys' abilities to do anything but get themselves killed. So he's going to be probably insolent. The British officer didn't like that. And he drew his sword and smacked Daniel Morgan across the face with the flat of his sword. Well, how do you think Daniel Morgan reacted to that? He clambered down off his cart and knocked that guy out immediately. I mean, flattened him. Big, huge dude. Well, striking a British officer is like a super bad crime. And they sentenced him, the punishment for that was 500 lashes, which is essentially a death sentence.
Yeah, it's going to kill him.
Nobody survives 500 lashes. Well, this tough SOB never cried, never flinched, and he counted out the lashes with the drummer boy and survived. And the rest of his life, he'd brag that they only did me $4.99. I still owe him one. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he would say the rest of his life. And even after that beating, he healed up from that, and he still served the British Army in this French-Indian War. He quit being a teamster and just became a rifleman. You know, he grew up on the frontier, so they all had the same rifles that Louis Wetzel had, the Kentucky rifles, long barrels, rifled, the whole thing. And the forts along the river, you know, they didn't have internet. They needed a message transferred, and him and another guy got picked to deliver the message. They tried to pick guys that were wood savvy, so they had a chance to, you know, beat the pickets and
survive.
stuff. They tried to beat the pickets, evade the Indians, and actually deliver the message. Unfortunately, they ran into this ambush. They think it was about 7 Indians. Killed the guy who was with them immediately. Shot General Morgan in the back of the neck right here, just inside, you know, if you feel your jaw, that little, right there. And it went right down and through his mouth, knocking all the teeth out on that side, and exited between his nose and his lip right here. And if you look at there's a lot of portraits they drew of him, you know, and those are they're almost as good as a picture, you know, once he became famous. You know, all the portrait they did it to all the famous guys, Washington, him, you know. You can see the scar on his face where that bullet came out. That didn't kill him. He recovered from that. And when the French-Indian War concluded, he went back to Winchester and took up his life of making money, hauling gear, fighting, drinking, gambling, the whole, you know, the same thing. And he's probably only, you know, 26 years old at this point. He's been whipped 500 times by the British. He's been shot by Indians at the behest of the British. So before he's 30, he's already, you know, gone through all this stuff. Another thing that was on the Winchester General Store ledger was there was multiple women coming down there and buying things that women buy on his account. Right?
That's interesting.
That's interesting. So that tells us, we can infer from that he had multiple girlfriends, and he probably wasn't, you know, doing the right thing and settling down with any of them. You know, on the frontier, there was a little bit different of a moral code than, say, back in New England. And it was frowned upon too. But what are you going to do? Go up to Daniel Morgan and tell him, yeah, you're not. You're gonna shut up. But eventually it just turned into one. And her name was Abigail Bailey. And in 1759, he finally bought a house with 225 acres. You know, even though that cost him money, he was making a lot of money doing his thing. But socially, you know, as someone who was a homeless kid and kind of a rough kid, he started getting the idea that, you know, he was looked down on by the upper class of society. So he bought a place in an effort to climb the social ladder. And this girl, Abigail, her dad was at the top of society, and she moved in 1763 with him, and she improved his manners, his language, taught him to read and write, and they had 2 daughters, and they eventually married in 1773. Okay. Now, in 1774, he went to that one of the combats we talked about last time, Dunmore's War, just one combat between the natives and the settlers of the Ohio River Valley there in modern day West Virginia. And if we remember, Louis Wetzel's father and older brother were at that combat. Louis was too young to go. So it's possible, there's no record of it I could find, that Morgan met and knew Louis Wetzel's father and older brother. Anyway, that was the one thing that happened. Then in 1775, the Battle of Lexington, the shot heard around the world. Oh shit, now we've just started a fight with the largest empire on earth. What are we going to do? And so the Continental Congress decided to form 10 rifle companies. Now, these 10 rifle companies are separate from the regular Continental Army that has a musket. All the principles of our fledgling government, Franklin, Washington, Madison, they all were intimate with frontiers people one way or the other. And they recognized that the rifle had certain capabilities that they wanted to try to use. You know, it had some weaknesses. You know, you can't reload it very fast. It's big. It's heavy. It doesn't have a bayonet. And so in the traditional sense, it's not an ideal combat weapon.
Right.
However, with a little imagination and some proper use, it can still contribute in its own way. And they already had that in their mind. That's why they decided to form 10 rifle companies. Virginia agreed to send 2. Now, remember, this guy is on the record in Frederick County, Virginia, of constantly being into some type of a dust-up with somebody. Well, when the Frederick County Council was asked to name who's going to lead these rifle companies, Daniel Morgan was unanimously selected to form and lead one of them. So regardless of what was on the ledger, he had demonstrated to the powerful people in that community that if you need a warrior, this is the guy we're going to send. This big, huge giant of a man. His back's all scarred up. He's got a bullet through the head. And he's pissed at the British at this point, you know, from what they did to him. So they're thinking, hey, this is the ideal guy to select, recruit, and take the rifle team. And let's add one more piece of information. After Lexington and Concord, what happened is a big siege happened in Boston. Way more militia showed up. When Paul Revere rode and warned them, it didn't end there. They had a whole system. So while the troops were coming from Boston out to Concord, thousands of dudes were starting to converge. So they lost the initial little battle there at Lexington and Concord and then went back to Boston. But by then, all the dudes were there, and Washington just cordoned it off. And it was a big siege. And they eventually had to pull out by sea and go north. But when they formed those rifle companies, the first order was, hey, those rifle companies come here to Boston. And that was just over 500 miles from Winchester. Daniel Morgan's first impressive feat was as soon as he got 96 dudes together that he picked, and he marched them to Boston in like 21 days. And it was like 500 and something miles.
Let's see, how many?
It's roughly like 20 something miles a day with all your gear.
Yeah, that's
so insane.
Yeah, back then, so 500 divided by 21. Yeah, you cut 23.
Yeah,
23,
and that rifleman has his rifle, his ammo, his food, his bedding, everything.
Yeah.
And so he's moving. And so these guys were were tough frontiersmen. They were in shape. They were used to living out in the
Yeah,
wild.
man. I mean, well, that was like how you got places.
Yeah.
Unless you had a horse.
Right.
Most people didn't have horses.
Couldn't afford a horse.
Yeah. And so you had to walk.
You had to walk.
And most of those dudes were traveling like 30 plus miles a day.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a PCT through hiker.
Right,
Only
right.
You don't have like the super ninja fucking trail shoe that's like cushioned and padded. You have
Plus you're packing a rifle that weighs a lot because it's 5 feet long. All your lead and shot.
Yeah.
Your powder.
All of it.
All your gear. So I don't think they carried as much as a current Marine, but they carried a lot.
No, yeah, man. We had like you're minimalistic, but at the same time you have to have what you need to survive.
Right.
Probably have a little bit of hardtack, right? Some food, some dried meat, something.
Now let's talk about a little fake news.
Fake news.
They had fake news back then. So this newspaper called the Virginia Gazette publishes. They called them Morgan's Riflemen, by the way. Once they got formed, it was Morgan's Riflemen. And they said in order to be one of these 96 guys, you had to demonstrate 2 shooting feats. The first one was you had to take one of your fellow riflemen. He got to hold a piece of wood between his legs that was like 5x7 with a silver dollar-sized paper target on it. And the rifleman had to offhand consecutively shoot 8 shots into that silver dollar paper target while your fellow rifleman's holding it. That's the first piece of what I say is fake news.
I think that's fake news.
Yeah. The second piece was the same rifleman had to be able to go on a quick march and at the end of it, hit a 7x7-inch piece of wood at 250 yards. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever looked over open sights at 250 yards. You'd be hell to see a 7x7-inch piece of wood.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that General Washington and Ben Franklin, whoever else was running things, I think they were deploying some fake news.
That's propaganda.
To try to intimidate the British.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter because soon Daniel Morgan wasn't going to need anybody to try to intimidate. He was going to demonstrate.
He's just going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he gets to Boston. It's a siege. And so between drilling his men, he's got them up there taking pot shots at any officer they can see, on the other side of the barricade. And at first, General Washington and some of the other officers, they kind of turned a blind eye to it.
It's like, boys are being boys.
They kind of just tried to act like they didn't see it, or try to downplay it.
Yeah.
But eventually, Washington had to come to Daniel Morgan and say, "Hey, man, you got to tone it down on the
we're getting some heat
on the murder of the British officers over here." And of course, Morgan's going to do what General Washington asked him. So, in the meantime, there was an idea formed to invade. They thought, how like in ancient Rome, when Hannibal was destroying Rome for 16 years straight, the only way they could get Hannibal to leave was to invade Carthage. And it's sad it took him 16 years to, come up with that idea. Well, now it's 1700 something, so they all have read the history. So one of the generals said, "Hey, let's invade Quebec, and that'll force the British to have to go up there to deal and get them out of here."
Mm-hmm. A little diversionary tactic.
Yeah. We'll attack them, and that'll force them to move all their troops and resources up there to defend, and that'll get them out of here. Good idea. But like a lot of good ideas, if it's not executed, it turns into a shit show, and that's what happened. Daniel Morgan, George Washington allowed. The traitors who got to lead this. What the heck was that general's name? He later became a traitor. And one thing I thought was, I wonder if he was already a traitor and caused this to happen. I don't know, because his side of he got shot himself, so surely that wasn't a traitorous act. And his side of the battle actually did their job, mainly because Morgan was there. I'm just trying to remember what his name is right now. There's so many names, so many famous people in this conflict. It's tough to keep them all, in my mind. Benedict Arnold.
Uh-huh.
And everyone knows he's a traitor. At this point, that wasn't known yet. It may not have been true yet. I'm speculating it might have been, but you guys can decide for yourself. So Washington tells Benedict Arnold, "I'll let you do this, but the troops you get to take with you have to volunteer." Well, how it turned out that everybody volunteered. and they had to have a drawing to see who got to go. Daniel Morgan and his regiment got selected. Benedict Arnold chose Morgan to go with him, and their plan was to do a pincer operation on the fort in Quebec. And this is a big palisade, so you've got to storm the thing, throw up a ladder, climb that ladder in the teeth of fire, go over it, kill enough people to stop the fire to get the rest of them over.
Right.
And they decided to attack the fort from two different directions, and they'd predetermined a muster point on the inside for the two different
the two elements
to meet. Mm-hmm. The first one up the ladder was Benedict Arnold himself. He's immediately shot and falls off. So the next one up the ladder is Daniel Morgan. He gets to the top, and they try to shoot him, but they miss him. But his face gets flamed, and it knocks him off the ladder, and he falls down. He goes right back up again, makes it over the top, falls on his back on a cannon, fucks his back up for the rest of his life, and they're trying to stab him with bayonets, and he rolls underneath, right? And while they're trying to stab him, more dudes are coming over. So that helped, and they shot all those guys, and they got in. So now Daniel Morgan's going roughshod. It's like a modern-day CQB, but with a 5-foot-long rifle and a hatchet and a knife, and they're just taking over every little block at a time. He makes it to the muster point. The other guy's name was General Montgomery. He's not there. And Daniel Morgan's initial reaction was to say, F that guy, we're going to keep going and just sack the city. But the more professional people talked him out of it and said, no, we got to wait here at least a few minutes. A few minutes turned to a few hours turned to half the day. And the next thing they know, they look back at the entrance point they'd created, and their lack of military training, they'd failed to secure that breach. And they look,
enemies back,
and there's redcoats occupying the breach. Montgomery never did come, and it turns out the reason was he got killed, second command got killed, third in command got killed, and so the whole troop they're never coming, they're gone.
Right.
Daniel Morgan.
There's no leadership.
Yeah, Daniel Morgan got left in there with his dick in his hand, literally. And now the British have reoccupied his breach, so he assaults it 2 or 3 times, but he can't get back out. And so then they get into a fight on the inside and kill almost all of them. They showed up there with like 600, 700 dudes. By the time it was over with, there was 350 dudes. And Daniel Morgan's the last one. He's got a sword still in his hand. They've got him totally surrounded with troops, with bayonets and loaded guns. And they're saying, hey, man, just drop the sword. It's over. And he's like, no, come get it. Come take the sword. Well, he's 6'2", 240 pounds, and they're like, fuck, we ain't going to come take the sword. What do we do? You know? And they don't want to shoot him because they figure if they do, the other 350 dudes are going to go ballistic. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to talk him down. And finally, I don't know if the British did this or if it just happened, but a Catholic priest came. And Morgan said, I'll give him the sword, but I ain't giving you fuckers the sword. And he gives the priest the sword. And they kept him in captivity for a whole year. This would have been, when this happened, it would have been late 1775, early 1770. I think when they stormed the walls, it was December 31st, 1775. And he sat in there till January 1777, when they released him to get some of their own prisoners back. I never found out who those prisoners were, but I guarantee you they regretted that decision. Whoever they got, they fucked up by giving Morgan back to Washington. That was a big mistake.
Right. It would later come. It would come back,
and it cost them the war. Mm-hmm. If they would have known, they would have never given Morgan back. They tried to recruit him. They said, "Hey, we'll give you all this money and make you a general or whatever."
Probably offered some land.
Yeah. Tried to get him because he was badass, and he said, "Hey, you fuckers gave me 500 lashes. You got me shot. You've treated me like shit my whole life.
Yeah, I'm over it. You
guys can kiss my ass. It ain't going to happen." So a year goes by, physically he deteriorates because, he probably was used to eating 3,000 calories a day or whatever it took to maintain his big ass. Well, they're feeding him, porridge and nothing. So he wasted away. He got injured. He never recovered from hitting that cannon on his back, but he gets out. And he's going back to Washington. He figures he's going to be reprimanded for failing. That's what he thinks. He goes, I failed. I got a bunch of my guys killed. They had to give up people that were valuable for my dopey ass. Washington's probably going to fucking put me in the stockade. That's what he thought. He gets back. Washington says, you're brave. You led that assault. You didn't give up. You're badass. You're promoted. I'm going to make you a colonel. Oh, by the way, I'm going to give you this regiment of regular infantry, and you still get to lead your rifle company. And so, fuck, Morgan's like, fuck, this is badass. What do you want me to do now? You know? So he writes him this letter that I wanted to read. Super badass.
I want to hear this.
Washington, you got to remember, is an aristocrat, educated. He's like the cream of the crop. So you have to read between the lines when you read what he says, right? In a nutshell, it's go raise hell, free reign, but he doesn't say it that way.
Yeah.
Now, let me find it here. Here we go. So let me read this.
Yeah.
This is General Washington in a letter to Daniel Morgan after being given the Provisional Rifle Corps that he already was in charge of before. What happened is the other regular officers didn't like the riflemen. For one thing, they were frontiersmen that didn't want to follow orders. They were insubordinate. They had a tendency to do things their way. So all these at this point, the original 10 rifle corps that were formed are now spread out everywhere, and nobody wants them, the regular officers. So what General Washington does is takes them all. They all want to work for Daniel. Daniel Morgan they'll do anything he says. He's got that much clout with them. So all the riflemen go with him.
Sounds like modern day scout snipers.
Exactly. So after he's also given the 11th Virginia Regiment, which is a regular trained military. So we'll find out later what Morgan realizes that you got to have both arms to really get things done. The regular infantry is not useless. There's uses for them. But if you know how to use the snipers in conjunction with them, a lot of good things can happen for you. But no one knows that yet. He's kind of figuring this out. So anyway, now he's been given those two units, and now Washington's written this letter to Daniel Morgan, August 16th, 1777. Sir, after you receive this, you will march as soon as possible with the corps under your command, to Peekskill. That's a town in northeastern New York, taking with you all the baggage belonging to it. When you arrive there, you will take directions from General Putnam, who I expect will have vessels provided to carry you to the Albany. The approach of the enemy in that quarter has made further reinforcement necessary. So what was happening, our attempt to invade Quebec failed. Now it's coming back the other way. The British are going to come in from Canada and invade New York. And Washington knows that. So now he's got his guy back. He's given him 2 combat units. He's going to send them up there to raise hell and slow these guys down. And that's what he's done. Who I expect will have vessels provided to carry you to Albany. The approach of the enemy in that quarter has made further reinforcement necessary, and I know of no corps so likely to check their progress in proportion to its number as that under your command. I have great dependence on you, your officers and men, and I am persuaded that you will do honor to yourselves and essential service to your country. I am, sir, your most obedient service, General George Washington. Imagine getting that letter. If you're Daniel Morgan. You've just been entrusted with everything. You're a nobody. You were, a couple years ago, getting in bar fights, getting spanked by the municipality down there in Frederick, Virginia. And now suddenly, our overall commander has just given you 2
You're
commands.
the main effort.
And told you, I'm entrusting you to check these British from coming down. That's amazing.
You're the main effort.
And so that must have been a real humbling feeling for Daniel Morgan to receive that letter, right? And so, of course, he gets up there. He does his thing. He snipes officers. He takes out baggage trains. He takes out cannoneer teams. He never gets in a pitched battle. He surreptitiously currycombs the countryside and the back roads and and picks off targets of opportunity, raising hell, and causing the British to really have a lot of problems, disrupting their communications, disrupting their leadership.
Well, it's also morale.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and remember,
morale,
their
enemy
people,
morale is down.
Remember, their soldiers are conscripts out of Europe who don't know where they are. They're scared shitless. They're in a wilderness. And so what the British, another one of their favorite targets was the Indian guides, because the Indians know where to go. And so if they could get an Indian guide, they could cause, even if the officer survives, he has no idea where he's at. He doesn't know what trail to take.
Right.
And so they're just causing all kinds of problems back in here. Now, eventually, the British get this guy named General Burrigon, and he's able to amass enough force that he's going to make an attempt to try to assault our main forces. So Washington then sends General Horatio Gates up there and orders Morgan, you find out from Gates what you're supposed to do. And these two forces start positioning. And, back then and even now, everybody's trying to fight a battle on their preferred ground. So before a fight would ever happen, usually the two generals would maneuver some, trying to figure out how to get the other guy to commit to a fight on his terms. So a lot of times fights just didn't happen. The two officers would move around, parry, try to figure out how to push the other guy into doing something unadvantageous to him. And so they do that for a while. Well, by October, or actually late September, there's this big battle coming up. It's called the Battle of Saratoga. It's a famous battle. Its conclusion causes France to throw in with us. So it's very important. The first one was a tactical defeat by us, but if anybody's heard of a thing called a Pyrrhic victory, where a victory can be so costly that it's actually should have been a defeat, that's kind of what the first Battle of Saratoga was. Morgan was the advance guard of our troops. So he had him and his rifle company out front where he should be, unlike in the, he's not going to let Horatio Gates get caught with his dick in his hand and get ambushed. So he's out there with his skilled guys, woodsmen, and they're trying to make contact. Where is the enemy exactly? And they make contact with the British's advance guard. In that brief struggle, they started shooting, all the officers on the British side were killed. Daniel Morgan peeled his guys off, reported back to General Gates what was up, and so now General Gates knows where the enemy is, and now these two sides are going to have a fight. The British won the field that day physically, but Daniel Morgan's guys killed so many officers from the tree line, from concealment, that even though they won, they might as well have lost because it hurt them bad, and it wasn't over. A couple weeks later in October, there was a second battle, and this is the famous battle where on Barragon's side there was an officer named Simon Fraser, who was a real good charismatic leader, and you could see him out there working the men, organizing the men, pumping the men up. And Benedict Arnold looked at him and looked at Daniel Morgan and said, "You see that?" He goes, "You got to have one of your men take him out. He's got to go." So allegedly, Tim Murphy was a rifleman underneath Daniel Morgan's rifle corps, and allegedly he climbed a tree, shot Simon Fraser off his horse. He didn't die right away. They packed him off. The Beauregard replaced Simon Fraser with another guy named Francis, and he also was shot. At that point, Beauregard realized, hey, I can't continue this because I can't keep an officer in the field. And without an officer, those guys can't form up and be disciplined anymore. And so they broke ranks, and they went back to a kind of a stronghold, inside entrenchments. Now, before I continue, I'll say history. There's been some argument lately that Tim Murphy wasn't the shooter. I think it's pedantic. I don't care if it was Tim Murphy or some other rifleman under Morgan. We know it was a rifleman under Daniel Morgan. We know the 2 officers were shot. Get over yourselves. You know, if it was Tim Murphy or not, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything as far as the lesson we're learning here. Now, what Morgan knew was, now what Beauregard's going to do is try to find an escape. And if I can trick him into thinking that he's got no escape, I'll get him to surrender. So he takes his group of riflemen, does a big flanking maneuver, and sets up on all the likely escape routes and shows enough force to make the scouting partners tell Beauregard, hey, we can't go. When in fact they could have gone. It was just him and his riflemen that were there. Mm-hmm. They could have pushed their way through. But he fooled them, and so Beauregard put up the white flag and surrendered. That's a huge deal for world politics. The Continentals have just won a pitched battle against the British, and so the French saw that and said, hey, we can afford to go in with these guys. We can throw in with the Americans. And so they did, and that later we'll see. We needed that. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have made it, right? So so Daniel Morgan totally affected that battle from start to finish. He's the first one that made contact. He'd slaughtered the officers that were in the advance party. During the battle, he killed 2 prominent officers on the battlefield, and he stopped the escape of the British Army by tricking them into thinking there's a big army back here, when in fact there was just riflemen, forcing the British officer to surrender, which of course had the political outcome. So that's huge.
That's huge.
Huge contribution. And so he gets done with Saratoga. He returns to General Washington, and Washington basically says, hey, I'm just going to use it like I did. Go hunting. Don't get in a pitched battle, but see what you can do. Mm-hmm. And so he spends a lot of time in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, just taking out British columns.
Targets of opportunity.
Yeah. His guys stay in the woods. They don't try to get out in the field or anything. The British are furious.
I can only imagine.
They're saying that this guy's a terrorist, that Washington's a terrorist for using them.
Well, you are a terrorist on the battlefield. Like, that's, period. That's what your job is. That's what you're there to do.
Yeah. And so they're obviously, our guys didn't care what you say. You're invading our place. You're trying to dictate your terms, and we're telling you to fuck off. And we're going to fight, and we're going to do what we got to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's basically how it played out. Now, if we would have lost, you got to figure Daniel Morgan would have been hung.
Oh, yeah, right? For sure.
And so it's a good thing we didn't lose. So anyway, he goes through a period here where he gets frustrated. He's got all this combat experience. He's demonstrated he's probably the best tactician of the war. But
these are relatively new tactics.
Yeah.
These are like...
Yeah, they are.
Like, what's this guy doing?
Exactly. They have no idea what he's
doing.
Non-standard. And in fact, the officers themselves, the smart ones like Washington and later Nathaniel Greene, they're smart enough not to tell him what to do.
Right.
They're like, hey, we really don't know what he's doing. We're not smart enough to tell him what to do. So he always did best when the general in charge just kind of let him have free reign to do what he wanted to do. But this period between the end of Saratoga and then when the Southern War starts, he gets real frustrated because he's not an aristocrat. He's not formally trained. And even though he's got all this combat experience, he keeps being passed over, and they're not promoting him. And so eventually he gets pissed off and resigns, and they let him resign in late June of 1779. They're not happy about it. Specifically, George Washington's not happy, and Horatio Gates is not happy. And they're begging him not to resign. After he resigns, they keep asking him to come back. They need him. But he's kind of throwing a temper tantrum, and he goes back to Winchester and just starts farming his 225 acres, seeing his girls, being with his wife, and saying, hey, F you guys. You guys can't figure out how to promote me. You got to let me go out here and work for some dope who doesn't know what to do. And it's almost like a little temper tantrum. Mm-hmm. And that went on for quite a while. And then what happened is the war kind of moved south. The British kind of lost their ass in the north, And so they had General Lord Cornwallis down in the south, and they thought, hey, that's going to be our way to defeat these guys. And General Gates went down there. George Washington sent him down there. He got in a big pitched battle with Lord Cornwallis at Camden and got destroyed. Now that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
The French might bail.
Mm-hmm.
The British might win. And that fired Daniel Morgan. Said, hey, I got to get over this. And he stopped everything he was doing, rode down to Hillsborough, South Carolina, found General Horatio Gates and said, what do you need me to do? I'm here. I'm with you. And on the spot, they promoted him to brigadier general, gave him his rifle corps back, gave him his infantry corps back, and Nathaniel Greene ended up being sent down there in December of 1780. And he was like Washington. He said, hey, your orders are to basically be a flying army. You're gonna get to do what you want to do. Don't get in a pitched battle. Go steal their baggage and give it to us.
Harass,
interdict, kill
disrupt.
the officers, disrupt, be a pain in the ass, which of course he was brilliant at. And he was super effective to the point where Cornwallis was so pissed. Now, this is the part of the movie, Patriot, that is somewhat accurate. It's somewhat depicted in that movie where Mel Gibson character is leading an army of riflemen, harassing, stealing his dog, stealing his notes, getting his baggage, killing his officers. And in the movie, which, and the guy's name even in the movie is close to the real guy's name. I think they called him Tarrington in the movie. And in real life, his name was Tarleton.
Okay.
So Lord Cornwallis, General Cornwallis says, hey, we got to put a stop to this Morgan fella. He's kicking our ass. He won't stand and fight anywhere. We can't find him. Every time we make contact with him, he kills some of our guys and disappears like the wind in the brush. So they have this guy named Bernard Tarleton. And he's kind of the head of their flying column. They called him the Legion, and they were cavalry. And he was the people hated him. That also is accurately portrayed in the movie. He slaughtered people that had surrendered. He housed his troops in civilians' houses without reimbursement. Mm-hmm. And he was just kind of a real brutal dick to the regular people. Mm-hmm. So that Cornwallis says, you're gonna just hunt this guy down and solve this for me.
Yep.
Well, Morgan, as a blue-collar person, had a good relationship with the militia, which were from there. And so he got a lot of intelligence on Tarleton. Who is he? What's his behavior like? And he got the idea that Tarleton was a real hothead. He didn't have much faith in snipers or militia. He thought they were provincial and that he was sophisticated and aristocratic and that he could just bowl them over anytime he wanted. Mm-hmm. So Morgan started kind of formulating this idea in his mind how he could use Tarleton's hubris, arrogance, and aggression against him. Mm-hmm. And now remember, he's got both a company of snipers and a company of regular infantry. And so he formulates a plan and he's going to break orders. Remember, Nathaniel Greene told him, don't get in a pitched battle. You're not regular infantry. But he decides, I'm going to, based on the intelligence he's got.
He thought he had the upper hand.
He says, I'm gonna bait this guy in. And so the Battle of Cowpens, famous battle, what Daniel Morgan did was once he made contact with Tarleton, it's just like before they're playing cat and mouse, but he always kind of knows where he is based on his own, scouts that are out there, and they're keeping tabs on where Tarleton is, and Tarleton's got his own guys, so they kind of know each other, and they're kind of maneuvering. Mm-hmm. Well, what Morgan did was he said, okay, I'm going to use the psychology of Tarleton against him. He doesn't think much of me. He doesn't think much of my militia. He doesn't think much of my riflemen. He's going to think, I'm going to go ahead and make a mistake and let him see I made that mistake. I'm going to make him think that I made that mistake because I myself am overvaluing my capabilities
Okay.
and make him attack me immediately, not realizing he's going to destroy himself. So that's why they kind of call him Hannibal of America, because this is what Hannibal did to the Rome, thousands of years earlier. Almost the same movement. So in the ancient battle, Hannibal put his weakest troops in the center, but himself. He put the veterans on the wings. Rome saw that and just immediately charged.
Frontal assault.
The reason Hannibal put himself in the middle was because he figured his presence was necessary to keep control of the weaker members, and he'd already pre-told them we're just going to have a controlled retreat. Well, pretty soon we got an inverted V.
And now the flanks are going to collapse in.
Back then they didn't have radios, but they had this battle line's like miles across, but they had flags.
Yeah.
And at the proper moment, Hannibal deployed the flag to say the flanks cave in, and he killed like 200,000 Roman soldiers and a couple out, just destroyed their whole army completely.
Yeah.
Rome has nothing.
Right.
They're done. There may be no battle in history that's that bad. It was so bad. It was like miles of corpse. It was just crazy. And now Rome's sitting there behind their wall with no army, shitting their pants.
Mm-hmm.
Morgan, who's illiterate, certainly probably didn't know who Hannibal was, unless maybe something happened and, maybe they gave him some quick education, on the fly. They may have done that. If they did, I didn't find it. But he basically does the same thing that Tarleton. He takes the snipers. He says, you're going to go in the middle and to the front, along with some militia. You're going to get 2 good shots and make them count. Tarleton's going to have no respect for you. He's going to immediately try to scatter you on horseback. He's going to charge.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, you're going to run. Then he must have known about Louis Wetzel, because the regular infantry is loading they're running, right? They're back to Tarleton, and they're loading like mad on the run,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like Louis Wetzel would do by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's 2 hills, right? He contacted Tarleton on the leeward side of this hill, made his 2 shots, and took off running. Now Tarleton's charging. They go up over this, so temporarily they lose sight.
They're on the military crest.
Yep. Now they're out of sight, so they're thinking, hey, I'm going to crest that hill and mow these guys down. What they don't realize is those guys have already reloaded and are stopped and are waiting.
Right.
So when Tarleton comes over the hill, they
get a
eats
volley.
fire.
Yeah.
Now our boys run to the flanks, and on the crest of this next hill is the actual regular Continental Army that Morgan had with him. And now Tarleton's down in the trough between the 2 hills, and his whole army's killed,
Mm-hmm.
just slaughtered, complete loss. He personally got away, even though Daniel Morgan chased him for days. But he got away. They desperately wanted to catch that bastard, but he got away. But his army, so now Cornwallis has lost that whole light infantry, fast response, strike team. It's gone. It doesn't exist. And they're so disgusted with Tarleton's conduct as an officer of letting this happen to himself, they send him home. They're like, you're a disgrace. You've destroyed the best troops in the service. We don't even want you on this field. And so he gets sent packing. And it's not very many months later that Nathaniel Greene himself does a similar type of thing to General Lord Cornwallis and destroys that army and ends the war. The war's over with. It took 2 years. So Lord Cornwallis surrendered, handed his sword over. 2 years of bickering back and forth before the British finally, in writing, declared us a sovereign nation. In the meantime, Morgan is kind of beat up from his whipping, his shootings, his combat, and he gets to go home. The Continental Congress awards him more land, and they strike us one-of-a-kind unique gold medal in honor for his services, award him that. They didn't have a Medal of Honor back then, but I think that's qualifies. And he gets to go home, and he retires to Winchester, like I said, now all over South Carolina, there are statues, roads, schools, all named after him. He lives until 1806, I think. He dies in his daughter's house. I'm not sure what from. He was 66 years old, so he lived about 20. He did a couple more things. He was beat up, but when the Whiskey Rebellion happened, General Washington said, "Hey, you're coming out of retirement for a little campaign with me," and they put him on one of the wings, and they marched into Pennsylvania. And the Whiskey Rebellions shit their pants and said, "F this. How much tax do we got to pay here?" But Washington was like, "Hey, I just saved you from like 80% tax with no representation. Now I'm asking for 20% tax with representation. And you son of a bitches, I think that's too much and you want to rebel?" Now that's a president. He got on his horse, got at the head of the army, told Morgan to get out of his house and come, and then went out there, and everybody said, "Oh yeah, it was a miscommunication, sir. We want to pay." And the Whiskey Rebellion was over without a shot fired. And so Morgan went back home. I think it's the last thing he ever did. But he's probably the biggest rags to riches story of the Revolution. Right, when the Revolution starts, he's basically nobody. By the time the Revolution ends, he's probably the greatest tactical commander we have.
Right. And he's just allowed to operate autonomously because he established trust.
Yeah. The time he got frustrated, it was all the officers they kept putting over him, wanted to tell him what to do, wanted to tell him how to act. And he's got all this combat experience. He's won the Battle of Saratoga, and he's like, "Why are these guys allowed to tell me what to do? Why am I not in charge of myself?" And that's why he resigned. Now we could argue that was a little bit petulant, especially considering the situation.
Well, perhaps.
In the end, when the chips were down, he did come back and,
well,
got in there.
There's some parallels with this because major exodus from the scout sniper community in the Marine Corps, because we knew that once we reached the rank of sergeant and you establish seniority, as soon as you're an infantryman and you're promoted to staff sergeant, which is an E6, your MOS changes and you become an infantry unit leader.
Yeah.
Which means needs of the Marine Corps. Your sniper designation doesn't mean anything anymore. It's on your record, right? You have it as an additional occupational specialty, but it's not a primary or promotable occupation.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys would jump ship to the reconnaissance community.
Okay.
And they would go to the reconnaissance community because they would be able to continue to do their jobs. Your primary job is no longer a sniper. You're a reconnaissance asset. And so the use of the rifle becomes an ancillary task, right? Or an additional task. So the other part of that is a mass exodus from the sniper community over to the Army on the special operations side, because the Marine Corps has its own special operations unit, but the mass exodus was strongly in favor of the Army going towards the Green Beret side, which would then set a guy up to go into a tier 1 level, a JSOC level unit by taking that selection, because it's easier to get to that selection from the Green Berets than it is from the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So a lot of parallels, and snipers in the reconnaissance asset, they do better with they do better. That's such a simplistic, they do better, but they're going to be able to perform their skills much more effectively if they're allowed to operate in that manner.
Yeah.
Right. Not necessarily saying that you're a cowboy, right? But if you have a commanding officer that, number one, has trust in your abilities and skills, faith that you're going to do the right thing, and that you're not a liability.
Yeah.
You're going to be an asset. Now, obviously, there's constraints to that to whatever degree, but I can attest from personal experience, being on both sides of that fence or both sides of that spectrum,
Yeah.
you want to be on that side of the spectrum. You
Right.
want to be on the side of the spectrum where the commander's giving you some ability to have autonomous input, right, about your skills. You're able to operate independently to
Yeah.
a certain degree, and understanding the large picture, the big picture. That's something that was always drilled into us as young men. Was we had to understand that we are just a very small piece in a big picture, but that small piece we have does have dramatic effects if used properly and you're an asset. So like I can completely see how that would have shocked, right? Those actions would have been shocking to regular
Yeah.
British infantry. It'd just be like a shot rang out and somebody falls, right? And that's it.
And there's nobody.
There's nobody,
Yeah.
right? And you're in dense timber. Like I grew up on the East Coast.
Yeah.
It's thick, right? And if you're in that situation as you're in a foreign land, thick vegetation, you're a soldier, you're seeing people get killed every day. You're wondering if you're next. You have incursions from natives, right, that are trying to fucking scalp you and kill you with a fucking hatchet.
Right.
This is a very, very
Compared
different.
to England, this is crazy.
Right. Yeah. Like this is crazy. Right. So not saying that like you didn't get into hand-to-hand combat on a battlefield and try to murder each other with
Yeah, there was
bayonets
plenty
and
of
swords.
brutality over there for sure.
Yeah. I'm not trying to detract from that
Right.
whatsoever, but the ability to influence the battle space in such a small but so impactful of a manner, that's the hallmark of snipers.
Right.
It's the hallmark, period.
Yeah, recently I watched a YouTube video where a guy was detracting away from the rifleman's contribution during the Revolutionary War, and I answered, and he came back, and I didn't respond again. And he's got a point. Most of the troops were regular infantry. They did have a musket. That's not my point. It's like Washington's own words in the letter. He had full confidence that Daniel Morgan and his riflemen were going to perform way outside their numbers, and that's who he sent.
That's the definition of a force multiplier.
Yeah. If Washington didn't think that, he would have sent regular infantry there, but he didn't.
Yep.
He could have done whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
The reason he sent Daniel Morgan is because he believed that Daniel Morgan and his riflemen were going to be the force multipliers he needed.
Yeah.
And I think history totally justifies that decision.
Well, you look at another parallel as well. It's like leadership that is not basically that's not you, right? They're not snipers. They're not recon Marines, right? They're not special operations. So they automatically have a chip on their shoulder about the fact that, oh, you think you're special.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, I don't think I know. Right. Because if everybody was doing this, then we would have the whole battalion coming out to try out for snipers or take the recon induct. But we don't have that. We have a very, very small number because not very many people want to do this. It's not always fun, right? We think it's fun, but even then there's some parts of it that's like, you think I want to be on a stalk lane in a ghillie suit in dry grass when it's 110 degrees outside?
Right.
Nah, not my favorite place to be.
Right.
But I know how to do it because that's part of the job. People don't want to even think about putting themselves in that scenario voluntarily, so they're not going to do it. Right. And so, yeah, you are a special asset. But where it gets out of whack is when that ego spills out, in ways that are unproductive counterproductive. It's a good word, to what the mission is. And then, you got a spotlight on you.
Yeah. Daniel Morgan, he had to deal with that. That's
probably why he had that issue. He was just like, would you fuckers just leave me alone?
Right.
Let me do my fucking thing.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I would just look at and just, I was always respectful, but I did have a reputation of speaking out.
Yeah.
And I knew, I knew that I had that reputation, but I might've done it just a little bit disrespectfully a time or two, but it was in my opinion, it was for good reason, and it needed to be said. And I was willing to suffer the consequences that came as a result of it. But sometimes that shit has to be done, but then other times you have to know,
Yeah.
bite your tongue.
And it ended up working out. I mean, it didn't cost the war. Like I said, he resigned, he went home, he was pissed. He wouldn't come back, even though Washington Gates were trying to get him back because they knew they needed him.
He's just bitter and pissed off.
Yeah. But when Camden happened and the whole overall war effort looked like it was in danger, Daniel Morgan stopped everything he was doing, found General Gates and said, "Hey, what do you need me for?" You know. So in the end, he got over it, and he was also rewarded. He was immediately promoted. That's what he wanted.
Yeah.
He wanted autonomy, so they made him a brigadier general, gave him his rifle corps back, gave him an auxiliary infantry corps, and just let him go. The best guy to send was Nathaniel Greene. He's a whole different story, but he was a super badass, and he was smart. You know, all good leaders are kind of that way. If you got a stud with you, don't micromanage that stud.
Right.
Find out how to support him.
Right.
And kind of let him go.
Yeah. So leadership is not about controlling or even managing people.
Yeah.
Leadership is identifying people's strengths and saying, okay, that strength fits into this mission, right?
Right. Find a way to use them.
In this niche. Now I want to empower that individual to do that thing.
And that's what Greene did.
Yeah.
He told him, hey, you don't got to fight a pitched battle. Take your riflemen, harass the hell out of the enemy, disrupt the enemy, kill the important targets. You know, it was just like it is now. If you shoot, it's risky to shoot.
It's very risky.
And so Daniel Morgan didn't want to just shoot regular privates. He'd only risk a shot if he thought, hey, that target's worth, getting into a problem.
Yeah, and that was a different point in time too, because the private didn't have any understanding of the plan.
Right.
Right. There was just a cannon fodder. Right.
He was a conscript.
Whereas now, not saying that it's on the Marine Corps side of the house, everybody is briefed on at least some semblance of the overall arching plan, which is the commander's intent. So even the rifleman in the fire team at that lowest level of organization understands the main effort.
Yeah.
Right? Understands.
Here's a question for you. So, in that day, by shooting at the Battle of Saratoga, by shooting Simon Fraser first and his replacement, it totally grenaded their abilities. Based on what you just said, in the modern era, if you were to, first of all, somehow even know who the officer was and shoot him, how disruptive would it be? Based on what you're saying.
More for morale than from a professional standpoint. The 2IC then automatically steps up and the plan filters down from there.
Yeah.
And that's
because they've communicated better.
Right.
It's less disruptive now than it would have been back
significantly then. Less disruptive. Yeah. And that's why we structure our military the way that it is. And that's why when you see even the conflict in Ukraine right now, the Russians are, they're largely leaderless. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way that the Russian army has always operated. And it's just, they don't, like in the onset of the war, many of those guys didn't even know that they were in Ukraine, right? Because they keep those things. That's only the officers know that stuff, and nobody gets briefed on what's going on. And so, that would be that. Well, they do that shit to us all the time. Right. But there's some satirical reference to, you want to understand why infantrymen are so fucking mean. It's because somebody's fucking with them all the time by not feeding them, or making them ruck long distances, or not telling them where they're going to be.
They get the short end all the time.
They get the short end. It's just like, you just put your shit on and walk and fucking stop when you're told. Right. Yeah. And that's the general gist. It's not quite that.
I see a lot of similarities to my own experiences in operations. The guys on the floor, when something goes wrong, they're the ones who have to eat it.
Yeah, for sure.
And the leadership analogies are also the correct. The best leaders I ever saw were, like we're saying, they wouldn't go into a machine shop and try to tell an expert machinist what to do. They would try to give them the overall and give them some freedom to do it.
Yeah. How long does this how long is this process going to take?
Yeah.
You should be asking questions, right? Yeah. You should be asking questions. You should be learning about your people, figuring out where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are.
Yeah.
And you got to nudge people gently into facing their weaknesses. But you didn't hire somebody to focus on their weakness.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like your job as a leader is to develop that, to become more of an asset, to help the individual do the skill that they're primarily there to do.
Yeah.
Right.
That's such a rare insight. You know, you're one of the few people I've ever met that thought that it was the leader's job to increase the man's skills and abilities. I think that's a very powerful insight.
It's important.
I think if a lot more leaders had that insight, I think things would be a lot better.
Well, and I also think that it's timing as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a certain amount of time, right? And so also a good candidate is going to have initiative.
Yeah.
You know, so they've got to have that as well. But if I don't have, like, it's time, money, and resources. Okay, the triangle: time, money, and resources. So if I don't have a lot of time, I need to have a lot of resources and a lot of money to make up for the loss of
they
time.
They balance each other out. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I don't have time to train up someone, right, I need someone to hit the ground running. You know, I'm not saying that this person is not a good candidate, but just not for this point in time.
Yeah, you're just going to have to pay and get a guy.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pay a bigger wage to make up for that.
Yeah.
But if you're in the situation where you do have the ability, sometimes in business, and you have foresight to be able to see things, plan for it, then sure, you have the time. But you have to be able to look at someone's aptitude and see if they're even capable of doing that.
Right.
Or if they want to, right? They might not even want to, right? And so you might just get yourself a worker bee that's just like, nah, man, I don't want to do any of that shit. I just want to be on this path.
I made all those mistakes at one time or another where I tried to make a guy something he wasn't. I thought I had the time to make a guy when I didn't. There was times where I should have just paid and walked away, you know, but because of ignorance, naivete, hubris, whatever, I've made all those mistakes at one time or another. Hopefully, you know, over the course of my career, I learned and got better. But I totally relate to everything you're saying there.
Well, we learned that from listening to these stories and history. Now, granted, we understand that the history books are generally written by the winners. Yeah. And the books that are...
If we would have lost, Daniel Morgan would be an unrepentant terrorist.
Of course, yeah. He would have been he probably would have been labeled as some sort of, as a reason.
They would have hung him for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's, everyone's perspective is their own, you know, so... I don't know. I think that these are great, man. And it's you building on the fact that it's problem solving, and you're using, like in this case, you're using a rifle to solve a problem. Hey, I have a superior force numerically and probably technologically superior force in terms of their ability to move. And, you know, you have to have logistics to run an army. Like you don't win wars with armies, you win wars with logistics that support the armies. So doing more with less and saying, I have this problem, right? We need to be able to outsmart, outmaneuver, right? So we have speed, surprise, speed, and violence. Yeah. Okay. Surprise, speed, and violence. And these situations, they're utilizing those three characteristics, right? So, and we touched, there's a fourth one, which is security. Yeah. Right. So you got to be able to secure the ground that you take. And you never want to give up ground. I mean, there is a balance to that sometimes, but it's surprise, speed, violence, and security.
Yeah. On the last battle with Cornwallis and Nathaniel Greene, Cornwallis wouldn't have had to surrender except for the French Navy came in and blockaded the port. So if that wouldn't have happened, he just would have left on the boats, and they would have lived to fight another day. Right. But the French Navy came and got into a fight with the British and won, and then started cannoning their fort from the bay. Yeah. And that's when Lord Cornwallis realized he was cooked.
Right.
He was gonna,
you only got so much time.
yeah, and if you try to keep fighting now, it's just going to be needless killing. You know, at least that's one thing those guys back then always did, and it seems like we've kind of lost that now, is that once the responsible officers on either side looked at the chess piece and realized it was checkmate, they would stop it to stop needless killing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It seems like after the big wars, it was so bad that doesn't seem to happen. People,
Oh my God, dude,
Japs
like-
just fought to the last man. You know, everybody died.
Yeah. I mean,
No reason.
It's call it whatever you want, right? Ideology or whatever. But I mean, like even in history, there's audio of Lyndon Johnson, right, in the Vietnam War. His ego is just pouring out everywhere.
Yeah,
He's not going to stop fighting for
just not his kid. Yeah.
Right. He's pissed, and he's got his shadow,
Yeah.
his darkness is taking over his ability to
Yeah.
make decisions, and more young men died because
For no reason.
yeah, for no reason. And I mean, yeah, okay, whatever, fucking stop the flow of communism, call it what you want. I mean, regardless of, and it always goes back to the same thing, right? That I've come to the conclusion of as an adult, is understanding that as we mature and grow older, we see things through different lenses, right? Through lived experiences. Regardless of how you view the world, regardless of how you view a political structure, it does not matter, because at the end of the day, there will always be young men searching for adventure, camaraderie, brotherhood, severity, austerity, right?
Yeah.
They want to prove themselves, and they're going to go into that arena to prove themselves.
Right. Regardless.
Regardless, right? And they don't know any
And
better,
God bless
because
them. God bless them.
I was one of them,
Yeah.
right? And so you, like, the way that I look at it is regardless of anything, or regardless of how that asset is utilized, it's our job to train them to be as ruthless and effective as possible.
All it will do is help them survive.
That's right.
So whatever we can do to help them survive, regardless of why or who sends them, the better off we are.
That's it.
And eventually, you know, history repeats itself. You know, in our lifetime, we haven't seen what we would consider frugal use of our young men.
Sure.
But someday there'll be a crisis that will need the young men bad.
Yep.
And if we keep training them, they'll be there, and it will be a noble cause, and we will need them. They need to realize that violence is the purview of young men. That's what it is. Old men can't do it. Women can't do it largely. Young men have a monopoly on it. And so, you know, those like people like you that can transfer lessons learned, that's only going to be good for them. And someday, hopefully, we'll utilize them more responsibly.
Yeah.
We can't really vouch for what's been going on recently.
Yeah. Well, dude, this was a great lesson. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I absolutely looked at it as a history lesson for sure. So who's next after this? Who do you want to talk about
let's
next?
talk about it. So the next conflict we actually get into is much later. You know, we have a conflict in 1812 that lasts briefly, but technology doesn't really change and doesn't really highlight a sniper. But before the Civil War, where snipers are utilized on both sides, there's a period of time where we're venturing west. And I'll have to check the dates. There's a guy out there named Billy Dixon. And it may be after the Civil War, so maybe we'll do the Civil War next. But Billy Dixon was a buffalo hunter. And they had made a treaty with the Indians for us to stay out of a certain part of Texas around adobe walls. That was set aside for the Native Americans to use. And of course, back then, people didn't really respect that, and so the buffalo hunters were wanting their tongues, wanting their hides, and so they encroached. And as a result, they got surrounded by 700 braves, and were now shitting their pants. And so the Braves launched, numerous assaults on. They got in this little place called the Adobe Walls, which are these little mud huts. Now the only thing the buffalo hunters had was, rifles. And these rifles were more sophisticated. Technology's gotten better. These are black powder rifles, but they have cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not smokeless powder, but so it must have been after the Civil War. So maybe we'll do the Civil War. But I'll just finish this brief story. So they make several assaults. They fail. So they end up having a meeting, way out there, a big powwow, try to figure out what they're going to do. And all the buffalo hunters looked at Billy, who was recognized as the best shot, and they said, take a shot at him. And, they didn't have rangefinders back then, but they'd learned a technique to use their thumb as a subtension tool,
Mm-hmm.
where they'd put their thumb out there and compare it to a buffalo and estimate how far he was, almost like using your mil-dot reticle.
Yeah.
Well, a horse is roughly the same size and length as a buffalo, so he came up, and then he also, remember, they're all herded in a big group. So he figured, I don't have to be exactly right. I'm just going to put my dope on and aim for center,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll hope to be close enough to hit somebody. And so that's what he does, and he sends the shot, and like 6 seconds later, an Indian topples out of his horse and hits the deck, and that scatters them. And they were also superstitious, so they said, well, there's got to be some kind of medicine we can't fight.
Yeah.
And so that ended the standoff, and later the Army came out there with a Corps of Engineers and measured it. It was over 1,500 yards away.
Okay.
And so that was, unbelievable. So he became, that was a hero shot. And
Right.
interestingly, when I was a kid in Precision Rifle magazine, a guy named M.L. McPherson replicated that shot. He built a papier-mâché Indian and a horse, and he found a big cliff bank, and he set it up there. And he had the measurement from the Army Corps of Engineers. He backed it up. He took the same rifle, black powder, and he said back then they had better black powder than we have now because that was the technology.
Oh, okay.
So he says, whatever performance I come up with, just know Billy Dixon had better shit than me. And he launched like 50 shots and marked each one. That horse and rider out of 50 shots got hit like 8 times. Like in the knee and the shoulder.
Just some random.
But the group around that horse, it was like a 20-foot group.
Right.
Right? So now imagine that horse being in the center of a group of horses and riders.
Yeah, somebody's going to get
Any
hit.
shot is going to hit. So basically the technology was good enough that Billy Dixon was assured, I'm going to hit somebody.
Yeah, it's basically precision area indirect fire.
Yeah. And he even admitted that at the time. He's like, hey, it's not like I picked a guy off.
And
I was a quail shoot.
Yeah.
I just put the dope on, aimed for center, and I knew somebody was going to catch a 500-grain slug.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
God damn.
Now, in the Civil War, there was sniping going on both sides.
Well, the Marine Corps is established 1775, coming up here on 250th this year, right? So we've got a lot of assets being utilized on the rifleman side of that.
Yeah.
From the use of the quatrefoil, right? Now we have an expeditionary force that's going to foreign shores, like shores of Tripoli.
Right.
So there's things to explore in that region as well.
We could talk about that because it's in your guys' song. So Thomas Jefferson sent them. Here's what was going down. We're still enemies with England, so our trade partner was France. The problem is that the Mediterranean's not too far away from France, right? It's like on the southern coast. It's on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Libya, that's where the Barbary pirates were, and they were taking us out, robbing everything and raising hell, taking slaves. American citizens were being put in the slave trade in North Africa, and Jefferson got pissed, and he knew he couldn't get permission. Congress was just as bad then as it is now, so he just secretly said, "Yeah, no, I'm sending the Marines
from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli."
And he sent them there, and the Marines, you'll know this, of course, but The Marines were always riflemen. They'd put them up in the masts of the ships
Yep.
and deliver precision fire down on the other ship from being up in the rafters.
Yeah. And the identification of friend foe was the quatrefoil.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's what happened. And we slaughtered the Barbary pirates. They landed on the beach, went inland, killed whoever was running this operation, and opened up the trade route so we quit being harassed. So that was one of the Marine Corps' first actions. And that happened in the early 1800s when Jefferson was the president. So yeah, we could look into that. Like I said, the Civil War had snipers on both sides.
Yeah, that's that's rich with history.
The Southerners had a rifle called the Whitworth that they imported from England that was better than what we had. We were building Sharps rifles here in America by then, and the Whitworth was more accurate. And the Confederates were just better at sniping, period. But the real interesting story is there was a guy named Jack Henson who was he was an old guy. He tried to stay out of the war. He owned a small plantation and had a few slaves, which he freed before Abe Lincoln did on his own. And he was trying just to ride the war out. And he would let the Union come in and water their stock and feed them. And he was like trying to be somewhat sociable. And then a horrible thing happened where his two boys that were not of age, but you got to remember in the Union's defense that they were being bushwhacked by bushwhackers. So they're sensitive to young males out in the world with a gun. That's usually a bad thing for them. So on Thanksgiving Day, the boys go out turkey hunting on their dad's property to get a turkey. A Union patrol sees these two teenage boys with a gun, and they're like, nope. And the boys say, hey, we're not soldiers, we're turkey hunting. Look, it's a shotgun or whatever. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't care. And killed them both. And then beheaded them, drugged their carcasses and heads to the house, and put their heads up on the gatepost going into the property so Mom could see. Well, Jack Henson took that the hard way, as you can imagine. And so he stopped everything he was doing. He vacated his family. He torched the place. He ordered a custom rifle. And for the rest of the war, he just went on a killing spree, starting with the people that killed his sons. So we could talk about him. He survived. They thought he was a terrorist, of course. And his rifle does survive. He was under Nathan Bedford Forrest's overall command, General Forrest, who was probably the most underutilized officer in the Confederacy. And he gave the rifle to him when the war was over. General Forrest didn't really care, and so he gave it to an aide of one of his staff officers. And that staff officer's like great-great-grandson's a judge now, like in Tennessee. He has the gun.
Oh, wow.
And you can YouTube it. It's cool as hell. He every now and then he brings it out. Like has a
showing.
A showing. People can come and look at it.
That's awesome.
And he says when he was a little kid, when his grandfather had it, he said a lot of times on the weekends, a grandpa would have that gun out back, and they'd load it up and let the kids shoot it.
You'd shoot it?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
so
awesome.
That's cool. We could talk about that guy. You can think about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So, let's hit that. We'll have a conversation about it this week, and
we could talk about basically the Confederate and the Union's different weapons and approach. Some of the major battles that were sniping affected the outcome either way. Jack Henson specifically, when you're back that early in the history of it, today there's going to be a lot of documentation on any sniper's activities for posterity because it's recognized as a thing. But back then, we know about Jack Henson, but there was many snipers on both sides that we'll never know who they were.
Yeah.
No one recorded their deeds.
Yeah.
Some of their shots, there's a famous shot where one of the Union officers said, hey, they couldn't hit an elephant from here. and he was immediately shot in the head and fell off his horse.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who did that.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's lost to history.
Right.
But he was a Confederate sniper. He had a Whitworth rifle from an unseen, unknown place, dropped that guy, and so everything he just said was not believed.
Right. Yeah, and so then it starts to, that's the mission and role of a sniper in direct combat, is to create terror amongst the
doubt,
enemy.
fear.
Yeah.
And so
Kill one, terrorize 1,000.
Yeah. And so both sides were utilizing it. So by then, and it seemed like every war after the Revolution, it was utilized in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, every time the war was over with, the powers that be would strike it down and not make it be a permanent facet.
Yep.
And they kept doing that until clear into Vietnam, when they finally stopped doing that. But now here they've done it again.
Yep. I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to be having some Marine snipers on, and it's not necessarily to discuss that specific aspect of, because I think those things, I mean, they do need to be spoken of, but there's a lot of differing opinions out there as to why, or like what the real reason is. And who knows, maybe we'll never know, but it's important that we, I have plans to, I guess, catalog that legacy.
Yeah.
And keep those experiences and teaching points, and
because it's going to come back eventually.
Yeah, it'll come back eventually. And when it does, we're going to have a place to point that new generation and say, this is what those dudes did previous to you.
Right.
Go listen to what they have to say, and let's do our best to not make the same mistakes that they did.
Yeah. Try to capture some lessons from the past.
Yeah.
And war's that way. It goes back and forth. So like right now, it just changed in our lifetime. You know, when you guys were in the GWAT, offensive operations were still totally doable and badass. Infantry could get out there and operate. That's gone. Now suddenly it's gone back to the defensive, where everybody's flying drones around, and anything that's alive that gets out there is immediately smoke checked, whether it's in a tank, a Jeep, on your feet. Mm-hmm. And so but that'll change again. It always does. So it goes back and forth. And I don't know what's coming down the pike as far as what's going to change this, but something will. Mm-hmm. Something will change this.
Yep.
There's probably people right now, really smart people, analyzing the fuck out of what's going on over there in Ukraine and trying to figure out a way to defeat it.
Oh, I know for a fact that they are.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, dude, this was a lot of fun. It was a great history lesson, man. I'm really enjoying these.
Well, I hope that people like them, and I enjoy doing them, and I'll start working on the next one.
Right on, man. Thanks for coming.
Yep. Thank you.
Right on.